facing the police every single day.
Florida prisons, time for reform. Advocates say state should take fresh look at crime and punishment. By John Kennedy. J. Kennedy at GatehouseMedia.com. Tallahassee wide-ranging criminal sentencing changes aimed at easing Florida's troubled prison system may gain traction at the state capitol, with supporters buoyed by a recent move from a sharply divided Congress and the arrival of new Governor Ron DeSantis. Attempts to end lengthy mandatory minimum sentences, prison terms for low-level drug offenders and to create early release programs have gone nowhere in Tallahassee for years. But a coalition of advocates, ranging across the political spectrum, say Florida should join a number of states and since last month, the federal government in C prisons, A6. Rayford Prison is located in Bradford County, near Stark. Wide-ranging criminal sentencing changes aimed at easing Florida's troubled prison system may gain traction at the state capitol. Herald Tribune staff photo / Mike Lang. Prisons. From page A1. Taking a fresh look at crime and punishment. This is the one area of government that needs the most reform, said Senator Jeff Brandes, RST Petersburg, budget chairman over criminal and civil justice. With the backing of President Donald Trump, Congress last month approved the First Step Act. It looks to reduce mass incarceration in federal prisons, letting thousands out early and enacting rehabilitation programs for federal inmates before their release. DeSantis in the U.S. House before resigning his Palm Coast seat in September after winning the Republican nomination for governor voted for an early version of the First Step Act, although that included none of the mandatory minimum changes later included. He ran as a tough-on-crime conservative, hailing the state's 55-year low crime rate and including as advisors sheriffs who have long opposed talk of overhauling sentences. Please, as we move forward, do not retract the things that got us this low crime rate, Polk County Sheriff Grady Judd said during a DeSantis Transition Committee meeting in December. Such views have drawn the backing of Florida House leaders in recent years. And that has stalled the push for change from some Senate Republicans and many Democrats in both chambers. A similar balance could emerge again when lawmakers convene this year's legislative session in March. But DeSantis is seen as a wild card. Among those pushing for change are such conservative organizations as Americans for Prosperity, Freedom Works, and the Faith and Freedom Coalition, along with the Florida Bar and criminal justice reform groups from around the nation. Supporters say the time is right for change in a state with more than 100 mandatory minimum sentences, strict sentencing guidelines imposed on judges, and a requirement that inmates serve at least 85% of their sentences. While more than half of state prisoners are in for violent crimes and unlikely to gain much from proposed changes, 36% of inmates are imprisoned for nonviolent drug or property offenses, and seen as most eligible for help. A small number of Floridians, about 100, are even locked up for repeatedly driving without a license, lawmakers have been told. Thousands more remain confined because they were sentenced as drug traffickers for selling a bottle or two of opioid capsules. Stealing anything valued at $300 or more can still bring a felony conviction and possible prison time in Florida, a level Brandes and others have been struggling to increase for the first time since 1986, to $1,500. We know that 90 to 95% of the people in American prisons will one day be released. And so it is incumbent on us to make sure they come out of prison better off and not worse, said Sean Hopwood, a Georgetown University Law Center professor, who served 11 years in federal prison for bank robbery. He told the Senate Criminal and Civil Justice Budget Panel that incentives have to be made available to inmates. Drug treatment, job training, family visitation, and a chance to reduce sentences through good behavior are needed, Hopwood said, especially for those facing years in prison. Trump's signing into law of the First Step Act just days before Christmas came after the measure drew overwhelming bipartisan support in both the House and Senate, a Washington rarity. But the federal changes affect only that system, which includes about 180,000 inmates. Florida's prison system, with more than 96,000 inmates, is the third largest in the nation and commands a $2.4 billion state budget, which has climbed 60% in the past decade. Last summer, former Governor Rick Scott's administration slashed $50 million in community re-entry, drug treatment and mental health programs, sending hundreds of inmates back behind bars because the state was scrambling to find money to pay for a costly prison health care contract. In December, prison officials told lawmakers that another $330 million would be needed next year to finance current programs. There is already a shortage of correctional officers, creating security tensions at many prisons. But much of the spending increase is for health care in a system racked by costly inmate illnesses including hepatitis C, HIV, and the ravages of long-term drug use. Gatehouse Media reported last year that Scott and his wife, Ann, were benefiting from their investment of millions of dollars in Gilead Sciences, whose costly Hep C drugs are widely used throughout the prison system. Branda said that for financial and social reasons, it is time for Florida to embrace the reforms enacted by the federal government. We know these ideas work, Branda said. We've seen them work in other states. These aren't new ideas. They're just new ideas for Florida. Another dramatic development occurred in November, when Florida voters approved an amendment to the state constitution. Amendment 11 repealed a 1885 provision in the Constitution called the Savings Clause, which prohibited the legislature from making retroactive changes to criminal sentencing laws. Lawmakers could make those sentenced under tough, mandatory minimums years ago now eligible for release, which could scale back the swelling prison population. All told, Florida has a chance to enact sweeping change this year, said Mark Levin with the Texas Public Policy Foundation. Levin's organization advocated for changes in Texas that led to the closing of 8 prisons since 2007. There's a true possibility of both increasing public safety and control costs to taxpayers and really enable people to find redemption. Many people in the criminal justice system do have the capacity to change, Levin said.
Hey Sheriff County, this is Sheriff County COPWATCH. I am using any video here with under fair use if you have criticism, reporting, teaching, etc. And please donate. I do not make money from YouTube, and there are different ways to donate in the video links. Thanks.